Next, I like to try to get a little bit of weight in the tail end of the aircraft, because I'd like to get the engine mounted as soon as possible and start trying to figure out where I'm going to mount everything else inside to maintain center of gravity. I'd rather not add weight and make it a heavier airplane if I can build it smart, keep it light, and put what weight has to go in it where it needs to go to get it to balance out. So I'm going to be putting together the elevators here. Some of these long screws can take forever to turn into hardwood blocks. I use good old-fashioned power tools. Not the best thing in all cases, and be careful, it can destroy stuff. I've seen screwdriver bits go through wings, I've seen it get over torqued and just run through and strip out. I set up the clutch so that it's a very light, I mean 2 fingers I can hold it, not a problem. Just enough so that I can turn the screw and it won't offer a lot of resistance or force it through any major resistance. So I line this up in here, get it started. And then with just a light trigger application, run it through the hardwood block. And then when you're just about at the end, there's just a little bit to go, I take a little dab of CA, and that's when I put it on the last of the thread so that as it goes into the hardwood, it really holds in place. You don't have to worry about it ever backing out. Down on flush onto the surface, and I went through the right way. Don't put your control horn in the other way. It's kind of tough to get the linkage through the wing. I don't know that I've ever heard of anybody doing it. I don't know if anybody would admit they did it. It'd be kind of embarrassing. If I did it, I might admit it, but that's just because it's funny. Self-deprecation is always better than poking fun at somebody else, right? But let me finish getting this control linkages set up. I'm going to move the camera over so I can show you what I'm doing when I'm installing the servos. So we'll be back in a little. Okay, I've installed the control horn and its hardware with the push rod going to the servo arm. I like to use aluminum servo arms. They're stiffer and less likely to break, and they won't strip out if there's too much resistance. Sometimes the plastic servo arms can strip out on the servo gear. So I always use aluminum and the Hanger 9 titanium push rods. So let's install servos now. I want to make sure that everybody builds their servos correctly. When you pull them out of the box, they have these little rubber grommets, and they're directional. There's a tab on this one where other servos may be where it wraps around the corner, but you're going to install that into the ear on the side of the servo. And then there's a metal grommet that has a flat mushroomed head on one end and just the barrel on the other end. You install the barrel from the bottom so that the mushroom part is on the bottom. That's so that when you mount the servo in the surface, there's a broad distribution for the clamping, and when you put the screw through, it provides a limited amount of space for the rubber to dampen any vibration going to the servo. Airplanes are very prone to vibration from the engines. So what we're going to do is place the servo in the wing. It's a little bit of a snug fit. That sounds worse than it is. That's the ribs on the heat sink of the servo catching on the edges of the balsa, and I'm trying to be careful not to break it. I'm going to take the finger drill here and drill my pilot holes for the screws to mount the servos into the hardwood. Alright, now that the pilot holes are drilled, I'll pop the servo back out because I want to make sure that there's a good hard surface for the screws to bite into. So I take a little bit of thin CA and put it on the holes and let it soak into the wood. Nice thing about the thin is that it sets really quick. You can almost watch it dry. So then you can pop your servo in. And you don't have to torque these down really tight. You don't want to strip out the wood, but the CA helps make it less likely to strip out. And it's just more for the screw to grab onto. You'll feel it get snug, and then just a little turn past snug is really all it needs. Okay, and this servo arm is free to move around. The screw is just lightly holding it on there. I wait to adjust this until I have everything set up on the plane, and just do one surface at a time, kind of as an assembly line. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the panels on the plane, install all the servos, and we'll come back later. Alright, well, I got the servos installed in the wings and the elevators, and I figured I'd start to put it together and see what it looks like, because I love it. Nice and big. I moved everything back to this table. I want to start measuring out for drilling for the engine, getting my hole for the servo, and seeing where the exhaust needs to mount before I treat all this, because you want to treat it for fuel and smoke oil. It'll soak into the wood and tear up your model, so you want to treat that. I'll be showing more of that later. Also, I was going to be putting the canopy on, but I think I'm going to take a break for a while and come back to it later. So Stay tuned. Alright, enough slacking off and back to work. Now I'm putting the canopy on the canopy deck, I guess. What I like to do is tape it down first, make sure your gaps here are even on both sides, and then it's lined up appropriately in the back and sealed down good in the front. Once we drill these holes, we'll take it off again later and then use some Zap-A-Dab goo to put the canopy down against the monocoat. And that'll help keep the prop wash from getting underneath the canopy and blowing it back. So let me drill a couple holes here and put the screws in, and we'll check it out later. Alright, just like every other hole that I've drilled for any of the server screws, I use the same finger drill to pilot drill the holes, and I just put the screws in. I didn't do the Zap-A-Dab goo yet because I'm probably going to take this back off and do a gauge cluster. Since it's winter time, I got plenty of time before the weather gets warm enough to do anything, so we'll get the plane ready to go and then come back and do some modeling touches before buttoning it up. I guess on to the next step. I'll start installing the cabane struts and the fuselage. Alright, the cabanes were pretty straightforward. It was a mechanical setup. You put a couple bolts into some blind nuts that are in the formers inside. Don't forget to use Loctite on those because you don't want them to come loose. And then the framework up top all has lock nuts, so you don't want to use Loctite. It'll eat the nylon and the lock nuts, and then they don't serve their purpose. I also made an aluminum bar up here to put in place the wing. Later on in the instructions, you use a bar to CG the plane, and I figured instead of wood, I'd use aluminum. I had some stock laying around, so I just drilled a couple holes, and I'll mark it later for the CG. Right now I wanted to point out, I've got the line scribed. It said to make our line a half an inch lower for the DA100. So I went ahead and measured out the line, scribed it across, and made a new vertical. And in the back of the manual, there's a template for the DA100. All you have to do is print it out, and then you can tape it up where it matches up on your lines. And then use the little pen drill to put a little pilot hole to start so that your bigger bit for the 1/4 bolts isn't going to walk. It's right on there. I'll get it bolted up and then we'll test fit the cowl and make sure that it's straight. I might have to wallow it out a little bit before I put the blind nuts in. So I'll get a little bit of adjustment there, but not much. I'll probably wrap it up after this, so I'll do my next recording in the morning. It's starting to get late, and I still gotta dump this to the computer and post it, so I'll talk to you all later.